All right. Now, what are apples? That they're substitutes. So if the price of apples increases, and let's just call this $1. If the price of apples went to $2, what would happen to the quantity of apples? They would decrease, right? So C is not in it. If the price of apples go up, people are going to buy less apples and more pears, the substitute. So the demand for pears is going to shift to the right. And that's why the price for pears increases. Okay. That was not a well done graph, by the way. Any questions on this? All right. All right. All right. Probably a million changes here. This was the feedback. Hey, last class, nobody rated under an 8, which probably meant people are starting to understand the monetary policy. So that's good. People wanted more FRQ practice. Tomorrow, what I'm going to do is we'll do the graphing with the whiteboards, but I'll break out certain parts of FRQ, so we'll get practice that way. And some people liked, I put the graphs in the notes, so you could use those graphs, okay? All right, the problem sets are due tonight at 11:59. If somehow you submitted them, or you have, some people are having a problem submitting them. If you have a problem, just send them to my email. If you submitted them and something today triggers, you could resubmit. We were supposed to have a quiz Monday on monetary growth and inflation, but because the days are going to get thrown back, I'm going to change it to Tuesday. All right. So the quiz will be due on Tuesday. Let me see. Is there any other? That should be it. Okay. I think I changed the class times for tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be, was today supposed to be day 3? Is that right? So tomorrow will be day 3. And I'm guessing we'll be virtual.
Yeah, that's the case.
Okay. All right. I'm going to give you a minute to look at these terms. Like for bond risk, I just wanted you to know that they're less riskier than stocks. All right. Then I'll give you a minute to look at all these. And if you have a question on any of them, we'll go over them. All right. All right, maybe it'd be best, maybe I'll just go through all the terms here. A budget surplus, that's when tax revenues exceed government expenditure. So the United States government brings in 100 million in tax revenues and spends 80 million, that's a surplus. The budget deficit's the opposite. Tax revenues are 100 million and government spends 120, so a negative 20. We have not had a surplus since Clinton's president. I can't see a surplus in a while. All right, monetary policy, there's 3. That's just the MS curve in the money market. The first one is buying and selling bonds, and that's the most used. You buy bonds to increase the money supply and to shift aggregate demand to the right. You sell bonds to decrease the money supply and shift aggregate demand to the left. The discount rate is the second one. You would raise the discount rate to discourage banks from borrowing it if you want to decrease the money supply. You would lower the discount rate if you want banks to borrow and increase the money supply. And the third and the least used is reserve requirement. If you want to decrease the money supply, you raise the reserve requirement. if you want to increase the money supply, you lower the reserve requirement. Those are the only three monetary policy. When you see monetary policy, the Fed, the central bank, you should think of the downward sloping demand and the perfectly vertical MS curve. Fiscal policy, government spending, and government taxes. The money multiplier, 1 over the reserve requirement. The spending multiplier is 1 over MPS or 1 over 1 minus MPC. Okay? All right, I'm going to show you a couple what I was looking here is what's the difference when a person deposits or the Fed buys bonds. So if you just look here, for personal deposits and the reserve requirement is 0.1, the multiplier is 1 over 0.1, which is 10. If someone deposits $100, 10% has to be kept in reserve requirements. 10 minus 100 gives you excess of 90. And to increase, the maximum money supply would be 90 times 10 equals 900. All right. This was some people said they just want, so that's when people put in. Now, the maximum the money supply can increase is 900. When someone first puts in 100, there is no change until the loans start going. Why? Peyton puts in $100. He had 100 in his pocket. Now he has nothing. So even though he lost 100, but now his bank has that 100. So the money supply hasn't changed. Any question on how you handle a personal deposit? You could just yell out, or you could hit the participation. Okay, or you could hit the chat. All right, the second is when the Fed buys a bond. So the Fed buys a $100 bond. The reserve requirement is 0.1. The multiplier is 10. There's no change in the reserve requirement. Why? Because the only time the reserve requirement is going to change is if deposits change, and this is not a deposit. This whole 100 then goes into excess, okay? And then you times that times the multiplier, 100 times 10, and you get the change of 1,000. Now, the minimum change here is 100, because when the Fed had the 100, at the Fed, that's not in the money supply. But then when they put the 100 back, they buy the bond, they put it in the money supply. Okay. Any questions on that? All right. Here we go. I'll give you a quick little problem here. Bob withdraws $100 from his checking account. The reserve is 10%. Okay. Just to answer that, I'll give you a minute. We'll see how we're doing. Okay. Brian Perry, what is the initial change in M1?
There would be no change because it's all M1.
Okay. Excellent. Ben, what is the initial change in reserve requirements when he withdraws the 100?
Then the reserve requirement goes down by 10.
Okay. All right. And so Ben took 10% of the 100, and he got the reserve requirement going down by 10. Okay. Ray, how much is the initial change in excess? How much does excess change on this $100 deposit?
Would it just be 10?
No, 10 was the reserve, but he's withdrawing 100.
Or 90?
90. Okay. So the excess will change 90. All right. All right. Let's see who we got. Then Mr. West, what is the maximum change in the money supply off this $100 withdrawal?
$1,000. Or wait, is it $900?
It's 900. Okay, good job. You take 90 times the 10, the multiplier, and the money supply will decrease by 900. Okay, now you do it the same way as if you put the money in the bank. You're just putting negatives next to everything. Any questions on this?
Wait, can you go over the first one again? The M1?
Yes. All right. So when the $100 was in demand deposits, it was M1. All right. Now the bank takes that $100 and gives it to Bob. That $100 is still in M1. So there is no change initially.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking. All right. Any other questions? All right. Let's see what we got going next. All right. The quantity theory of money asserts that the quantity of money determines the value. All right. So the more money that's put in, the less value of money. So we did, money supply in the world, real world is determined by the Fed. All right. The banking system, by how much they loan and hold, they could, if the Fed buys bonds and the banks don't loan it out, the money supply will not increase as rapidly. And also consumers, if consumers don't put money in the bank, they slow up the money supply. When we do this, we assume the Fed precisely controls. I mean, that's just the way our model is, okay? So the thing that here on this slide, I think the big takeaway is quantity of money is negatively related to the value of money, okay? And I'll show you that in a second, and positively related to price levels. And think of this, when price levels go up, people need more money, all right? So price levels go up, the value of the dollar decreases, right? Because you could buy less with it, but people need more money. So that's kind of the interpretation of that statement. And I don't think that's anything that you guys don't know. It's just like, and by the way, this chapter will say this about 5 times in different ways. So here's this graph that's in the chapter that might look, instead of interest rates here, they put the value of money on this side. So there is your money supply, okay? All right. And all they're saying is, if you adjust, like if you increase, what happens? If you increase the money supply, the value of money, notice on the left side, decreases, but the price level increases. So the more money you put in the system, the less it's valued, and the price levels go up. All right. Now, I think I'm going to show you like how you know this on the 3-step graph in a second, but this is a graph that could be on the quiz that they use in the book that I just want you to look at, okay? And just, it's value of the money, and it's on these 2 axes like that.
Mr. Bressler, for the value of the money, why don't they use the nominal interest rate there?
Oh, because instead of nominal interest rate, they're trying to show you how the value goes down while the price level goes up. They're just trying to show you different information. They're not trying to show you interest rates here,
Okay,
okay? But I'm going to use this and kind of show you with the interest rates how that goes together. So if you increase the money supply, what happens? Interest rates go down. If I just drag this line across, I have investment going up. If investment goes up, what happens? Aggregate demand shifts right. So notice, I increase the money supply, price levels go up. We all know when price levels go up, the demand of money increases. And at PL1, my purchasing power is down. So the value of my money is down. All right. So what we've been doing with this chart or shifting aggregate demand and realizing that purchasing power decreases, that's all they're saying. They're just using this other graph to demonstrate it. Okay. So again, it's nothing you don't know. And kind of like Ben alluded to when he asked before, if money supply increases, interest rates go down, investment goes up, aggregate demand shifts up. So we know the price levels go up. When we know inflation, which all price levels are, as inflation goes up, we know then the value of money decreases. Okay? They just have a different graph to show it to you. Any questions on that? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to give you a minute to think of this. Think of the money supply graph here. Suppose President Biden outlaws the use of credit cards. Take a minute and think first, what would happen on the money supply graph? Okay. All right, Alex. If President Biden outlaws the use of credit cards, are we going to need more or less money in our pockets?
We're gonna need more, a lot more. So the money demand's gonna shift way to the right.
Okay. So I'm going to shift money demand to the right, like you said. Okay. All right. Now, this doesn't have it here, but Alex, one last question. If money demand shifts right, what's going to happen to interest rates?
Interest rates are going to go up, right?
Interest rates would go up, right?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So you handled that. Let's see. The second question was, what would happen to price levels with no government intervention? So Nick, if the demand for money increases with no government intervention, what would happen to price levels?
It increases.
Price levels would increase?
I guess
Think about it. If interest rates go up, Nick, what's happening to business investment and consumption?
It's decreasing.
If business if business investment and consumption decreases, what happens to aggregate demand?
It decreases. So price
Accurate.
levels go down.
So price levels would go down, right? So what would the Fed have to do to keep price levels the same as they were before? Anyone? You could hit the participation button. You could hit the chat. All right. We got a couple of hands here. Let's see who we got. Jordan, what would the Fed have to do?
They have to increase the money supply so they could buy some bonds, or they could reduce the discount rate. A couple of different things.
Okay, so let's say they bought bonds and now they, so what would happen if they bought bonds? The interest rate would go back, say back to where it started, right?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So, and I'm going to try to slide back here. So if we're looking at this, what will the demand of money? Alex answered that. Demand is going to shift right on that graph. With no government intervention, Nick answered that. What's going to happen? Price levels are going to go down. And then Jordan finished it out with what would the Fed have to do to keep price levels stable? They're going to have to increase the money supply. And really what we're saying is they got to get interest rates back to where they were. So interest rates, went up with the demand of money, the increase of money supply balanced the interest rates and kept price levels stable. Okay. Anyone have any questions on that? Again, if you do, you could probably just yell out to me, or you could hit that participation button.
Mr.
Anyone?
Bressler,
Yes.
I don't understand how, just by looking at the graph, how price level decreases.
By looking at this graph?
Yes.
All right. So here is, right? Here is your change in demand because he outlawed credit cards, right?
Oh, wait, I think I see it now. Never mind.
Now, as Jordan said, if you increase money supply, I'm just going to put it like I'm going to just draw this line right down here. You notice we're back on 2 for the price level.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Yeah.
started at A at 2, and now we're at B at 2.
Yes.
Okay. Does that make
Okay.
sense to you now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, because I think you made me explain it better. All right. Any other questions? All right, let's see what we got next. All right. If you read this, I think sometimes when I read it, it gets confusing. Okay. I like to think of real variables as like purchasing power. So, or real GDP is really how, let's just say how many tractors you could make. All right. Real wages is how many Cokes I could buy. So like real is about like units. Nominal wages is my paycheck. Nominal GDP is output times dollars. Okay. Nominal interest is what I pay at the bank. Real interest is the purchasing power. I think I have an example coming up here. So like if the price of a compact disc is $15, price of pepperoni. So the purchasing power here, is just the relative price of the CDs. Okay. And this might not be the best example. So what they're trying to say, again, in different, like in this classical dichotomy, is if the central bank doubles the money supply, nominal variables double and real variables remain unchanged. And I'm going to just, again, like, this, but it's just said in a different way. I'm going to just draw like the LRAS curve here. Okay. And sorry for not labeling everything. All right, and that should have been in the middle. That's bad. That's bad drawing. All they're saying is, in the long run, if I went from here, point A, to point B, but eventually I'm making more product. I need more workers. Workers get wages increased, right? and that shifts supply back to C. All right, so first thing, the LRAS, which represent, on the bottom here is real GDP. Even though nominal GDP increased, real GDP stayed the same. Even though nominal wages, because remember at point B, they negotiated for higher wages, but at point C, price levels went up, so real wages stayed the same. So that's all they're really saying is that in the long run, nominal wages will change. Nominal GDP will change. Nominal interest will change, but real variables stay the same. Okay, any question on that? Okay. So that's the dichotomy, the separation of nominal and real, and that when you increase the money supply, that you tend to change real variables, change nominal variables and not real. All right. Okay. And again, like the classical economy, the money neutrality, they're pretty much the same thing here. So if you double the money supply, nominal prices double, and what happens to relative prices? They stay the same. So here, if you have 15 CDs and 10, you got 1.5 pizzas per CD. Now, if you increase the money supply, which will lower interest rates, which will get business investment, will shift AD and change price levels, all you're going to end up with is CDs doubling, say, price of pizza doubling, but the real variable staying the same. The ratio is still 1.5 pizzas per CD. All right. So that's all the neutrality of money that is saying is money. The change in money supply in the long run does not change real variables, but only nominal. Okay. And again, the key is remembering in the long run, because in the long run, you get back to the long run aggregate supply curve.
Mr. Bressler?
Yes.
Oh, never mind. In the long run, I was gonna say, but doesn't changing the money supply change shift aggregate demand, but in the long run? Sorry.
Okay. All right. Now, I think we've done velocity of money before. It's in this chapter. I like to use the M times V equals P times Y. And really, the velocity of money is the average time, say, a dollar bill is used, as we're buying all this stuff, say, throughout a year. All right. And typically, they want you to plug in. Now, the one thing that I don't think we went over, I did say P times Y is nominal GDP, but just Y, which is output, is real GDP, right? Real GDP is how much you could produce. All right. And, nominal GDP is price level times real GDP. Okay. And this, again, is the average dollar was used 3 times. All right. So if Y is 3,000, and you plug in the value of pizzas is 30,000, the money supply, so 30,000 over 10,000 gets you 3 transactions. That is like on a quiz, that is a typical type question. Okay. Here, I'd like to give you a minute to look at this. Suppose the money supply is 100,000, the nominal GDP is 1.2 million, and the real GDP is 400,000. Come up with the price level, the velocity of money, and if real GDP increases by 5% and the velocity is constant, what does the Fed have to do to prevent prices from rising? Right, I'll give you a minute or two to look at those. Okay. Jordan A. What did you get for the price level?
Shouldn't price level be its quantity times the velocity divided by output? Right?
All right, hold it. Now, what does nominal GDP equal?
1,200 or not
No, but I
1,200,
mean, like-
1.2 million.
Right, 1.2 million, but nominal, the formula would be for nominal GDP, price times output, right?
Right, but isn't it just given to us?
Well, the price isn't given, the output is given.
Oh, I was talking about the nominal GDP.
Yeah, the nominal GDP is given,
Right.
but I'm saying if we know the nominal's 1.2 million and we know the
Mhm.
output is 400,000, what is the price?
Then it should be 1.2 million divided by 400,000, right?
Right,
The 3.
right. Okay. So as he said, if nominal equals P times Y and you get 1.2 million equal 400,000 P equals 3. Okay. Any question on that one? Drew, what would the velocity of money be here?
I'm sorry, I was muted. I didn't realize. So,
Oh, okay.
that is the price level divided by the money supply.
Well, the velocity would be the, if we went back here, the,
Oh, right. Yeah. I meant to say price level times real GDP divided by the money supply.
Okay, so what did you get for that?
So that is 3 times 400,000, which is 1,200,000 divided by 100,000. So that is 1.2.
Would it be 1.2 or would it be 12?
Is it 12? I don't know. I think I might have just messed up the zeros.
I think it's 12.
Okay.
Okay, so you get 100,000 V equals, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Last one. If real GDP increases by 5% and the velocity is constant, what does the Fed have to do to prevent prices from rising? Andrew Myers, do you have this?
I didn't get to that one yet, Mr. President.
Okay, well, okay. Ben's gonna help us out. What do you got here, Ben?
You would have to increase it by 5,000, right?
Well, by what percent?
Well, by 5%.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And yeah, if they're saying, right, well, let's use this one. Or they're saying velocity is constant and output is going up by 5%, but they want P to be constant. So V and P are going to be constant, then M has to increase or decrease the same as Y, right? Because if M goes up by 10, M times, then Y has to increase by 10. Any questions on any of those three? Okay. Very similar to the problems you have as homework, okay? All right, the next thing, and this will be the last thing, because I think this is kind of like a homework problem based on this too. Inflation tax, what they're trying to say is when government creates more money, it puts more money in the money supply, interest rates go down, business investment and consumption increase, aggregate demand shifts right, price levels go up. Therefore, the money you have in your pocket is worth less. So that's like kind of being taxed. Okay, so, price level rises and the dollars in your wallet are less. So they're not taking those dollars out, but by making them worth less, it's like they're taxing you. Now, why would money in a bank not, because in the banks, you're also getting interest. So that and kind of in the long run, your nominal interest should equal kind of inflation so they're hoping that the money in the banks or in your savings accounts will not be hurt because you're getting some income. The only negative to holding money in the banks is, let's just say I make $5,000 in interest a year, I get taxed on that. So if that 5,000 was keeping me up, with inflation, I get hurt by getting taxed by it. So just to go over this again, the inflation tax, it's not a real tax in the fact that they're taking money out of your pocket. They're just making the money you hold in your pocket worth less. Now, a savings account, since you're getting interest, that tries to keep you on pace with inflation. So you don't really get hurt if your money's in a savings account. Where you do get hurt is that interest earned gets taxed, and therefore you then have it's very difficult to keep up with inflation there. Okay. Any questions on anything we did today? Just hit the chat if you have a question.
Mr. Bresser, I have a question.
Go.
So for the last slide and the last problem about the prices remaining stable.
Yeah.
So you said that has to do with the money supply being proportional to nominal, right?
Well,
Like if-
here, so let's just put numbers in here. Say M is 10 and V is 2. All right, and that's 20. So let's make P5 and Y4, right? They're saying that V is constant, right? And then they don't want P to change, so that's constant. So, that means M and Y, they have to go up the same percentage for these equations to continue to balance out.
Okay, so M and Y are proportional then.
Yeah.
Okay. And
that
then
what you
Y
wanted?
is output, right? And then M
Correct.
is obviously okay.
Any other questions? Okay, I did videotape this and I'll put it out in case I talked too fast and you didn't have a note sheet and you want to go over it. I think I did cover some of the problems that you'll have. Those are due at 11:59. I truly, truly appreciate you being here today. Everyone who I'm just giving you 5 out of 5 for being on the drill, if you got the drill right or not, for coming on and participating today. Okay? All right, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm guessing we'll be virtual tomorrow, and I'll see you on tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Bressler.
I got you, Alex. What's up?
What are the problems called?
I think it's problems. It's under the topics page, problems of monetary growth and inflation.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. I got a chat here. Okay. Alex, I took care of this, right? Okay. All right, Peyton. It's just me and you now. What did you want to go over?
Mostly questions that were going to be on the quiz that were
what?
Questions that were going to be on the quiz that involve the interest rate, because I don't really understand how the interest rate goes up and stuff.
You mean with the money supply graph?
Yeah. Also, the M times V equals P times Y problems. I don't understand as well.
Okay. So the ones we went over, you didn't understand really?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm kind of like lost on those.
All right, let's go over these, the ones we went over first. Let me stop recording this. That'll be the first thing. Okay.